The sound of a shattering teacup echoed through Rosalind Ainsley's modest parlor as she stared at the letter in her trembling hands, the words blurring through her tears. Outside, the late afternoon sun of Paso Robles, California cast long shadows across her garden, a garden she would soon no longer call her own. "He cannot possibly mean this," Rosalind whispered to the empty room, though the banking seal and her husband's unmistakable signature told her otherwise. Harold Ainsley, her husband of 7 years, had emptied their accounts, transferred the deed to their home, and departed for San Francisco with Vivienne Leclerc, the French seamstress who had arrived in town barely 6 months prior. Rosalind sank to the floor, the crisp parchment crumpling in her grip. At 25, she found herself utterly alone and soon to be homeless in the unforgiving territory of 1878 California. The letter, cold and businesslike, informed her that she had 1 week to vacate the premises before the new owners would take possession. 7 days to dismantle a life she had carefully built. 7 days to find a way to survive in a town where a woman alone had precious few respectable options. When morning came, Rosalind dressed with mechanical precision, pinning her auburn hair into a severe bun. The gold wedding band on her finger felt like a mockery, but she left it there for now. It offered a thin veneer of protection in a world that showed little kindness to unmarried women. The banking house of Paso Robles was a stately building of red brick, incongruous among the predominantly wooden structures of the growing township. Inside, Mr. Whitmore, a balding man with perpetually ink-stained fingers, avoided meeting her eyes. "I regret to inform you, Mrs. Ainsley, that your husband withdrew all funds from your accounts 3 days ago. The paperwork is quite in order," he said, sliding documents across the polished desk. "He had full legal right, as I'm sure you understand. And the house," Rosalind asked, her voice steadier than she felt, "sold." "The deed transfer was completed yesterday afternoon." "I see." She folded her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. "And might I inquire as to what funds remain in my personal account?" Mr. Whitmore cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mrs. Ainsley, you do not have a personal account. Everything was held jointly with your husband, who had sole signing authority." The reality of her situation crashed down upon her with devastating clarity. Harold had left her nothing, not a single dollar to her name. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Whitmore," she said with dignity she did not feel, rising from the chair. Outside, Rosalind paused on the boardwalk, watching as the stagecoach rumbled down Main Street, kicking up dust that glittered in the morning sunlight. Perhaps she could return to Boston, to her parents' home, but the journey would require money she didn't have, and pride she couldn't sacrifice. Her father had warned her against marrying Harold, calling him a fortune hunter with wandering eyes. How it would burn to prove him right. Lost in thought, she didn't notice the commotion until it was nearly upon her, the thunder of hooves, shouts of warning, and the terrified screams of a child. Rosalind turned just as a team of horses, spooked and dragging a driverless wagon, barreled down the street directly toward a small boy frozen in fear in their path. Without thinking, Rosalind darted forward, snatching the child and tumbling with him into the narrow space between 2 buildings just as the runaway horses thundered past. Her heart pounded wildly as she sheltered the sobbing boy against her chest. "Tommy, Tommy." A frantic woman appeared at the alley entrance, her face pale with terror. "Mama," the boy cried, scrambling from Rosalind's arms toward his mother. As Rosalind rose shakily, brushing dirt from her skirts, a tall figure moved into the entrance of the alley, momentarily blocking the sun. "That was either the bravest or most foolhardy thing I've ever witnessed, madam," said a deep voice tinged with admiration. She looked up into the weathered face of a man she recognized vaguely from town gatherings, one of the ranchers from the outskirts of Paso Robles. His features were sun-browned and angular, with clear gray eyes that assessed her with frank interest. "I didn't stop to consider which," she replied, attempting to regain her composure despite her racing heart and torn sleeve. He stepped forward, offering a hand to steady her. "Isaac Porter, madam, I believe we've crossed paths at the Founders' Day celebration last summer." "Rosalind Ainsley," she responded automatically, taking his offered hand. His palm was calloused and warm against her own. "You're bleeding," he observed, nodding toward a scrape on her forearm. Before she could respond, the mother of the child returned, tears streaming down her face. "Mrs. Ainsley, I don't know how to thank you. My Tommy would have been killed for certain. Anyone would have done the same," Rosalind demurred. "No, madam, they wouldn't have," Isaac Porter interjected, his expression grave. "Most folks would have been too scared to move that quick." The incident drew a small crowd, and Rosalind soon found herself the reluctant center of attention as the story spread. Through it all, Isaac Porter remained nearby, his tall frame and quiet presence somehow reassuring amid the chaos. Once the excitement died down, and the street was cleared of the damaged wagon, Rosalind found herself walking beside Porter toward the town's only apothecary to have her scrapes tended. "You're Harold Ainsley's wife," he said, not a question but a statement. "Heard he left town suddenly?" Rosalind stiffened. "News travels quickly in Paso Robles." "Small towns have long ears," he agreed without apology. "Word has it he headed to San Francisco with the French woman." "How fortunate that my humiliation provides such entertaining gossip for the townsfolk," she said bitterly, quickening her pace. Porter matched her stride easily. "Wasn't meaning to pry, Mrs. Ainsley, just offering an ear if you've need of one." "What I need, Mr. Porter, is employment and a roof over my head within the week," she replied bluntly, too weary for pretense. "My husband has left me with neither." He stopped walking, causing her to pause and turn toward him. His expression had hardened, his jaw set in a tight line. "He left you with nothing." The quiet outrage in his voice was somehow more affecting than if he had shouted. "It seems I failed to secure the necessary legal protections for myself," she said, attempting lightness and failing miserably. "A costly oversight." Isaac Porter studied her for a long moment, his gray eyes thoughtful. "I might have a proposition for you, Mrs. Ainsley, if you'd care to hear it." "I'm afraid I'm in no position to refuse propositions of any legitimate nature," she replied carefully. "It's legitimate enough," he assured her, a slight smile softening his weathered features. "But perhaps we should discuss it after Doc Miller's had a look at that arm. Some conversations deserve a proper sitting down." The apothecary's bell jingled as they entered the shop, where the smell of medicinal herbs and tinctures hung heavily in the air. As Doc Miller cleaned and bandaged her wounds, Rosalind found herself watching Porter, who stood by the window, his tall frame silhouetted against the afternoon light. There was something reassuring about his presence, a steadiness that contrasted sharply with Harold's flashy charm. What proposition could this rancher possibly have that would solve her dire circumstances? Rosalind wondered as Doc Miller finished his ministrations. Whatever it was, she had precious few alternatives to consider. "There now, Mrs. Ainsley. Keep it clean and come see me in a few days," the doctor instructed, patting her hand kindly. After settling the bill despite Rosalind's protests, Porter guided her to the small cafe across the street. Once they were seated with cups of steaming coffee before them, he leaned forward, his expression serious. "Mrs. Ainsley, I'll be direct. I own the Silver Creek Ranch about 5 miles outside town. It's good land, about 800 acres with strong water rights. I've worked it for 15 years, built it up from nothing." Rosalind nodded, uncertain where this was leading. "The thing is," he continued, turning his coffee cup slowly between his hands, "I'm facing a problem. My sister Martha's been keeping house for me since my folks passed, but she's marrying a fellow from Sacramento next month and moving there." "I see," Rosalind said, though she didn't, not yet. "The ranch is too much for one person to manage, the house, the accounts, the workers. I need a partner." His gray eyes held her steadily. "What I'm proposing, Mrs. Ainsley, is a marriage of convenience." Rosalind nearly choked on her coffee. "I beg your pardon, hear me out," he said, raising a hand. You need security and a home. I need someone with your education and capabilities to help run Silver Creek. It would be a business arrangement, properly legal, with protections written in for you that your first husband neglected. Mr. Porter, we scarcely know each other, she protested. True enough, he acknowledged. But I know you've got courage, seeing what you did today. I know you're educated, as anyone who's heard you speak can tell. And I know your hard-working Mrs. Henderson at the general store speaks highly of your contributions to the town's improvement committee. Rosalind stared at him, struggling to process his unexpected offer. You would marry a complete stranger, not completely strange, he corrected with a hint of a smile. We've met at 3 town functions, and I've observed you enough to know you're exactly what Silver Creek needs. And what of? Other marital expectations? She asked carefully, her cheeks warming despite her attempt at businesslike detachment. His expression remained respectful. That would be entirely at your discretion, Mrs. Ainsley. I'm offering a partnership, not demanding wifely duties. You'd have your own room, your own privacy, and a third share of the ranch's profits formally deeded to you. A third, to start. Equal partnership after a year if we find the arrangement suits us both. Rosalind studied him carefully. At perhaps 35, Isaac Porter was an attractive man in a rugged way, with laugh lines around his eyes suggesting a good nature, yet there was a solidity about him that spoke of dependability something Harold had utterly lacked. Why not simply hire a housekeeper? She asked. A housekeeper doesn't have the standing to represent the ranch's interests in town or with the banking house. A wife does. He paused. And truth be told, Mrs. Ainsley, I've watched how this town treats unmarried women trying to make their way. It's not a fate I'd wish on anyone. It was brutally pragmatic, yet undeniably true. A woman alone in the West faced limited options, most of them grim. I would need time to consider, she said finally. Of course. He nodded, reaching into his vest pocket and extracting a small card. This is where you can reach me. I'll be in town until tomorrow afternoon. As they parted ways outside the cafe, Rosalind clutching his card in her gloved hand, Isaac Porter tipped his hat respectfully. Whatever you decide, Mrs. Ainsley, I wish you well. That evening, Rosalind sat in what had once been her parlor, surrounded by belongings she would soon need to sort and sell. The house felt hollow already, as if it sensed its mistress would soon depart. She turned Porter's card over in her hands, considering his proposition with the practical mind that had always been her strength before emotion clouded her judgment with Harold. Marriage to a virtual stranger seemed reckless, yet remaining in Paso Robles alone and destitute was certain disaster. If Porter proved false, she would be no worse off than she was now, but something in his direct gaze and forthright manner suggested he was not a man given to deception. And the legal protections he offered would ensure she never found herself in such a vulnerable position again. By morning, her decision was made. Isaac Porter was loading supplies into his wagon when she approached him outside the general store the following day. He straightened as she neared, removing his hat respectfully. Mr. Porter, she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I have considered your proposal and am prepared to accept with one condition. His eyebrows raised slightly. Name it. We will have a proper courtship period of 1 month before the wedding. I will come to Silver Creek as your sister's replacement, helping with the household and learning the business. If after that time either of us wishes to withdraw from the arrangement, we may do so without obligation. A slow smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. That's sensible thinking, Mrs. Ainsley. I accept your condition. He extended his hand and she took it, feeling the strength in his grip. When can you be ready to leave for the ranch? He asked. Rosalind glanced back toward the town, toward the house that was no longer hers and the life that had crumbled beneath her feet. I can be ready tomorrow. There is little I wish to keep. Porter nodded, understanding in his eyes. I'll send the wagon for you and your belongings at 9. We can be at Silver Creek by midday. As promised, the wagon arrived precisely at 9 the following morning. Rosalind stood on the porch beside two trunks containing the remnants of her former life clothing, books, and a few cherished mementos. She had sold what furniture she legally could, providing herself with a small sum that now resided in a hidden pocket sewn into her skirts. The driver was a weathered man with kind eyes who introduced himself as Hank, Silver Creek's foreman. "Mr. Porter sends his regrets, madam. Had to handle a situation with some straying cattle. He'll meet us at the ranch." The journey to Silver Creek took them through rolling hills golden with summer heat, past vineyards and orchards heavy with fruit. As they crested a final rise, the ranch spread before them a sprawling complex of buildings nestled in a verdant valley with a creek flashing silver in the sunlight. "That's Silver Creek," Hank announced with unmistakable pride. "Prettiest ranch in the county, if you ask me." It was indeed beautiful, with a large white painted main house, several outbuildings, a substantial barn, and corrals where horses grazed peacefully. Beyond stretched fenced pastures where cattle dotted the landscape like mobile shadows. As the wagon rolled into the yard, a woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was perhaps 40, with Isaac's gray eyes and a welcoming smile. "You must be Mrs. Ainsley. I'm Martha Porter. We're so pleased you've come." She helped Rosalind down from the wagon with a firm grip. "Isaac's just returned and is getting cleaned up. Come in, come in. You must be parched after that dusty ride." The house was surprisingly spacious and well-appointed, with polished wooden floors, comfortable furniture, and large windows that flooded the rooms with light. It spoke of prosperity without ostentation, practical comfort rather than showy wealth. "It's lovely," Rosalind said honestly as Martha showed her to what would be her room, a pleasant chamber overlooking the garden. "Isaac built most of it himself," Martha said proudly. "Started with just a 2-room cabin when he claimed the land. Every year he'd add a bit more. The man never stops working, that's his trouble." Her fond tone took any sting from the words. Footsteps in the hallway announced Isaac's arrival. He appeared in the doorway, hair still damp from washing, dressed in clean clothes that, while simple, fit his tall frame well. "Mrs. Ainsley," he greeted her with a nod. "I hope the journey wasn't too taxing." "Not at all," she assured him. "Your home is beautiful, Mr. Porter." A pleased expression crossed his face. "Thank you, it's been a labor of love." He glanced at his sister. "Martha has Mrs. Ainsley had a chance to refresh herself?" "I was just suggesting that very thing," Martha replied. "Dinner will be ready in an hour. Nothing fancy, just honest ranch food." Left alone, Rosalind unpacked her clothing into the cedar wardrobe that scented the air pleasantly. Through the window, she could see the activity of the ranch men moving between buildings, horses being led to stables, the rhythmic chopping of wood. It was a working enterprise, alive with purpose. How different from the idle, decorative existence Harold had crafted for her in town, she thought with sudden clarity. Perhaps this arrangement, unusual as it was, might offer something her first marriage never had: meaningful work and genuine partnership. Dinner was indeed simple, but abundant: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and garden vegetables, followed by apple pie still warm from the oven. The conversation flowed more easily than Rosalind had expected, with Martha drawing her out about her interests and experiences in Paso Robles. "I understand you were quite active in the Town Improvement Committee," Isaac remarked as they finished their meal. "Yes, though my contributions were modest," Rosalind replied. "We organized the funding for the new schoolhouse and established the town's first lending library." "Modest, she says," Martha chuckled. "Isaac, Mrs. Henderson told me Mrs. Ainsley practically wrote the charter for that library herself and then convinced the town council to donate the land." Rosalind felt her cheeks warm. It was a collaborative effort. "That kind of thinking would be valuable here," Isaac said thoughtfully. "Silver Creek has grown beyond what one person can manage effectively. I'm better with the land and the stock than with ledgers and correspondence." After dinner, Isaac suggested a walk to help settle their meal and to show Rosalind more of the ranch. The evening was mild, the setting sun painting the hills with amber light as they strolled along the creek that gave the ranch its name. "This is truly beautiful land," Rosalind observed, watching a pair of deer drinking at the water's edge. "It is," Isaac agreed, his voice softening with obvious affection for the place. "My father always said land speaks to those willing to listen. This land called to me the moment I saw it." "How did you come to be here?" she asked, curious about the man who might become her husband. He walked silently for a moment, considering his words. "I came west after the war, fought for the Union, saw too much death, wanted open spaces and honest work afterward. Did some cowboying, saved every penny and eventually had enough to stake a claim here." "You've built something remarkable," she said sincerely. He glanced at her, approval warming his eyes. "Thank you, it hasn't been easy, but it's been worth every hardship." He paused, then added, "I should be clear about what I'm offering, Mrs. Ainsley. Silver Creek isn't just land and buildings. It's a legacy I hope to pass on someday. To children," she said softly, understanding his meaning. "Yes, though I know that complicates our arrangement." His expression remained respectful, but there was no mistaking the question in his eyes. Rosalind considered carefully before responding. "My first marriage was lacking in many ways, Mr. Porter, but I have always wanted children. If we find our partnership agreeable, I would not be opposed to expanding our family." Relief visibly eased the tension in his shoulders. "That's good to know." After a moment, he added, "You might consider calling me Isaac, at least when we're not in company, if we're to be partners." "Then you must call me Rosalind," she replied with a small smile. "Partners should be on equal footing." The following days established a rhythm as Rosalind learned the workings of Silver Creek under Martha's patient guidance. She discovered that running a ranch household was far more complex than managing a town home. There were ranch hands to feed, supplies to inventory, accounts to balance, correspondence to maintain with buyers and suppliers. Yet the work, though demanding, gave her a satisfaction she had never found in the genteel activities that had filled her days in town. Isaac, true to his word, treated her with unfailing respect, including her in discussions about the ranch's operations and seeking her opinion on matters both large and small. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch, talking of books they had read or sharing stories of their pasts. Rosalind found herself looking forward to these quiet conversations, drawn to Isaac's thoughtful nature and unexpected humor. 2 weeks into her stay, disaster nearly struck. A summer thunderstorm rolled through the valley with unexpected ferocity, lightning igniting a fire in the south pasture, where a herd of valuable breeding cattle grazed. The entire ranch mobilized, fighting the blaze with wet blankets and hastily dug fire breaks as rain lashed down in sheets that paradoxically did little to dampen the flames. Rosalind, refusing to remain safely in the house, joined the effort, helping to organize a bucket line from the creek. For hours they battled the fire, everyone soaked to the skin, faces blackened with smoke and ash. When it was finally extinguished, they had lost only a small portion of grazing land and no animals, a victory snatched from potential catastrophe. As they trudged back to the house, exhausted beyond measure, Rosalind found herself walking beside Isaac. Without thinking, she reached out to touch his arm. "That was well done," she said simply. He looked down at her, rain and sweat mingling on his face, and something shifted in his expression, a warming, a softening. "You were remarkable out there," he replied, his voice rough with fatigue but sincere. "Not many would have worked alongside the men as you did." "We protected what's ours," she said, then faltered, realizing the presumption in her words. "I mean, no, you had it right the first time," he interrupted gently. "What's ours?" In that moment, standing in the rain-soaked yard with the smell of smoke still heavy in the air, Rosalind felt something within her chest unlock a door opening to possibilities she had thought forever closed after Harold's betrayal. Martha's departure for Sacramento the following week marked a turning point. As the wagon bearing Isaac's sister disappeared down the lane, Rosalind felt a momentary panic at being truly alone with the man who was still, in many ways, a stranger. Yet Isaac seemed to sense her discomfort and made a point of ensuring she never felt vulnerable, always leaving doors open when they were together in the house, maintaining a respectful distance. "I've been thinking," he said one evening as they sat in the parlor, Rosalind mending a shirt while Isaac read agricultural reports. "Our month is nearly up. I'd like to know if you've reached any conclusions about our arrangement." Rosalind set aside her sewing, considering her words carefully. "I have found Silver Creek to be everything you described, and our working relationship has been surprisingly harmonious." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "Surprisingly, you must admit, our circumstances are unusual," she pointed out, returning his smile. "They are that," he agreed. Setting aside his papers, he leaned forward, his expression serious once more. "But the question remains, Rosalind. Do you wish to proceed with our marriage?" She met his gaze directly. "I do, Isaac. I believe we can build something worthwhile here together." Relief and something warmer flooded his face. "Then if you're agreeable, I thought we might ride into town tomorrow to speak with the minister and make the necessary arrangements." "I would like that," she said softly. The following morning dawned clear and bright, a perfect late summer day. As they rode side by side toward Paso Robles, Rosalind felt a strange mixture of nerves and anticipation. This marriage would begin so differently from her first, with clear eyes and practical expectations, rather than romantic illusions. "I've been thinking about the legal arrangements," Isaac said as they neared town. "I'd like to deed a full half share of Silver Creek to you upon our marriage, not wait the year as I initially proposed." Surprised, Rosalind turned to study his profile. "That's very generous, Isaac." "May I ask what prompted the change?" he considered before answering. "These weeks have shown me that you understand the value of what we're building. I don't fear you'd ever treat Silver Creek as anything less than the treasure it is." The simple trust in his statement moved her more than flowery declarations of devotion ever could. Their arrival in Paso Robles caused a predictable stir of gossip. Heads turned as they made their way to the minister's home, and Rosalind held her chin high, ignoring the whispers that followed them. She had faced the town's pity when Harold abandoned her. She could face their curiosity now. Reverend Lawrence welcomed them warmly into his study, listening attentively as Isaac explained their wish to marry. "I understand you've recently suffered a difficult separation, Mrs. Ainsley," the minister said gently. "Are you certain this is what you want?" "I am, Reverend," Rosalind replied without hesitation. "Mr. Porter and I have formed a partnership that we believe will benefit us both." The minister's eyes twinkled. "Partnership is indeed the foundation of a good marriage, though I hope you'll discover it can be much more as well." He consulted his calendar. "I could perform the ceremony this Saturday if that suits." As they left the minister's house, Isaac suggested they visit the bank to begin the property transfer paperwork. The same Mr. Whitmore who had informed Rosalind of her destitution now watched with poorly concealed astonishment as Isaac instructed him to prepare a deed transferring half of Silver Creek Ranch to Rosalind upon their marriage. "Are you quite certain about this arrangement, Mr. Porter?" The banker asked doubtfully. "It's most unusual." "I'm quite certain," Isaac replied, his tone brooking no argument. "Mrs. Ainsley will be my full partner in all respects." Outside the bank, they nearly collided with a couple turning onto the boardwalk. Harold Ainsley and a striking dark-haired woman draped in expensive fabrics, who could only be Vivienne LeClaire. Harold froze, his handsome face registering shock at the sight of Rosalind on Isaac Porter's arm. "Rosalind," he said after an awkward moment, his voice holding a note of forced joviality. "How unexpected to see you. We were just passing through on our way back to San Francisco." Rosalind felt Isaac tense beside her but kept her own expression composed. "Harold," Miss Leclerc. I trust you're well. Harold's gaze flicked nervously between Rosalind and Isaac. Quite well, yes, I see you've made new acquaintances. Mr. Porter and I are to be married on Saturday, Rosalind said calmly, feeling a surge of satisfaction at the shock that registered on Harold's face. Married? But it's only been a month since you abandoned your wife without resources, Isaac interrupted, his voice deceptively mild despite the steel beneath the words. Fortunately for us both, Mrs. Ainsley has demonstrated remarkable resilience. Harold drew himself up, attempting dignity. Now see here, Porter, no, you see here, Ainsley. Isaac cut him off, stepping closer. Though he made no threatening move, his height and the controlled anger in his bearing were intimidating enough. You'll address your former wife with the respect she deserves, or you won't address her at all. Your choice. A tense silence stretched between the men until Vivienne tugged at Harold's arm. Harold, darling, we'll miss our luncheon reservation, she prompted in a heavy French accent. Harold's jaw worked, but he finally gave a stiff nod. Congratulations on your upcoming nuptials, he managed tightly before allowing Vivienne to lead him away. As they watched the couple depart, Rosalind released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. Are you all right? Isaac asked quietly, studying her face with concern. To her own surprise, Rosalind found she was. The sight of Harold had stirred anger but no longing, no regret. Yes, she answered honestly, I'm quite all right. Isaac offered his arm once more. Then shall we continue our errands? I believe you mentioned wanting to visit the dressmaker. Their wedding day dawned clear and mild, with just enough breeze to stir the lace curtains in Rosalind's room at Silver Creek. She dressed carefully in a new gown of deep blue silk, practical enough to be worn again for church and social occasions, yet fine enough to honor the significance of the day. The ceremony at the small Paso Robles church was simple but dignified, attended by the ranch hands and a few townspeople who had maintained friendly relations with Rosalind despite the scandal of her abandonment. When Isaac slipped a gold band onto her finger, replacing the one from Harold, that she had finally removed, his hands were steady and warm around hers. I, Isaac, take thee, Rosalind, to be my lawfully wedded wife, he recited, his gray eyes never leaving hers, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death us do part. Though they had begun with talk of convenience and practicality, Rosalind felt the weight of those traditional vows settle around her heart with unexpected rightness. When it came her turn to speak, her voice was clear and certain. The wedding supper back at Silver Creek was a joyous affair, with tables set up in the yard beneath lanterns strung from tree to tree. There was music from a fiddle and harmonica played by two of the hands, dancing on a wooden platform Isaac and the men had constructed, and enough food to feed twice their number. As twilight deepened into night, the guests gradually departed until only the newlyweds remained, standing together on the porch of what was now truly their home. Mrs. Porter, Isaac said softly, testing the name. Yes, Mr. Porter, she replied, a smile curving her lips. I want you to know, he said carefully, that while this began as a practical arrangement, my feelings have evolved. I don't expect anything from you that you're not ready to give, but I would be honored if you would consider me not just a partner, but a husband in truth. In the warm glow of the lanterns, Rosalind studied the face of this man who had offered her not just shelter and security, but respect and dignity when she had been at her lowest. The face that had, somehow, become dear to her over these weeks. Isaac, she said softly, reaching up to touch his weathered cheek. I would like that very much. When he bent to kiss her, it was gentle and questioning at first, then deepening as she responded with unexpected eagerness. His arms came around her, strong and steadying, and Rosalind found herself thinking that perhaps the greatest journeys sometimes begin with the most practical of steps. That night, when he led her to what was now their shared bedroom, there was nervousness but no fear. Isaac's patience and tenderness awakened responses in her that Harold's selfish lovemaking never had. And in the quiet aftermath, lying in the circle of her new husband's arms, Rosalind felt a sense of homecoming more profound than anything she had experienced before. "I never expected this," she whispered into the darkness, his arm tightened around her. "Neither did I, but I'm grateful for it all the same." The autumn brought changes to Silver Creek. Under Rosalind's management, the household ran with increased efficiency. The books balanced with precision, and new markets opened for their beef through connections she established with merchants in San Francisco. Isaac, freed from many of the business concerns, focused on improving the breeding stock and expanding their grazing lands. Together, they made a formidable team, each complementing the other's strengths. In the evenings, they would sit before the fire, discussing the day's work and making plans for the future, a future that seemed increasingly bright. It was on one such evening in late November that Rosalind set aside her mending and turned to her husband with news she had been confirming in her own mind for several days. "Isaac," she began, a flutter of nervous excitement in her stomach, "I believe we may need to prepare a nursery by next summer." He looked up from his papers, confusion crossing his face before understanding dawned. The papers slipped from his fingers as he moved to kneel before her chair, his hands gently covering hers. "Are you certain?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. "As certain as one can be this early," she replied, smiling at the wonder in his expression. "Doctor Miller confirmed it yesterday when I was in town." Isaac's face transformed with a joy so pure it brought tears to Rosalind's eyes. Wordlessly, he gathered her into his arms, his cheek pressed against her still flat stomach as if already greeting their child. "Thank you," he whispered finally, looking up at her with eyes suspiciously bright. For everything." "It's I who should thank you," she said softly, stroking his hair. "You gave me a home when I had none, a purpose when I was lost." "And you brought life back to Silver Creek," he countered, rising to sit beside her on the settee. "This land has always been rich, but it was incomplete somehow. Now it feels whole." The months that followed were filled with preparations not just for the baby, but for the future of Silver Creek. Isaac and Rosalind worked together to expand the main house, adding rooms for the growing family they both hoped for. They hired additional hands to manage the increased workload, and Rosalind organized a proper office for the ranch's business affairs. Spring brought renewed vitality to the land and to Rosalind herself, who bloomed with her pregnancy. Despite her expanding waistline, she insisted on maintaining her role in the ranch's operations, though Isaac was vigilant about ensuring she didn't overtax herself. One afternoon in early May, as they inspected a new irrigation system Isaac had designed for the vegetable gardens, they were interrupted by the arrival of a dust-covered rider. "Mr. and Mrs. Porter," the man called, dismounting stiffly. "Telegraph message for you from Sacramento." He handed Isaac a folded paper. Isaac read it quickly, his expression grave, then passed it to Rosalind. It was from Martha, and the news was dire. Her husband had died suddenly of a heart ailment, leaving her alone in a city where she had few connections. "We must invite her to return to Silver Creek," Rosalind said immediately, one hand resting protectively over her rounded belly. "This is her home as much as ours." Isaac's face softened with gratitude and love. "I was hoping you'd say that. I'll send a telegram right away." Martha's return to Silver Creek brought both sorrow and grief for her loss, but gladness to be among family again. She threw herself into preparations for the baby with the enthusiasm of a soon-to-be aunt, sewing tiny garments and helping to furnish the nursery. "You've made something beautiful here," she told Rosalind one afternoon as they sat shelling peas on the porch. "Isaac is happier than I've ever seen him. We've built it together," Rosalind replied, smiling as she felt the baby kick vigorously. "And soon there will be another Porter to carry it forward." When July arrived with its shimmering heat, Rosalind found herself increasingly confined to the house, her body heavy with the child that would soon arrive. Isaac hovered anxiously, torn between his duties to the ranch and his concern for his wife. "Go," she urged him one morning when an issue with the north fence demanded attention. "I have Martha here, and Mrs. Donovan will arrive this afternoon to help with the washing. The baby won't come today." But Rosalind's prediction proved false. By late afternoon, the first pains began, and by evening she was in the throes of labor, Martha and Mrs. Donovan attending her while Isaac paced the hallway outside their bedroom, wearing a path in the floorboards. The birth was difficult and prolonged, Rosalind's strength taxed to its limits as the summer night stretched on. When the first light of dawn touched the eastern hills, a lusty cry finally rang through the house, followed soon after by a second. "Twins," Martha announced, appearing in the doorway with tears streaming down her face. "A boy and a girl, both healthy and strong." Isaac stood frozen for a moment, disbelief warring with joy on his face, before rushing past her into the bedroom. Rosalind lay exhausted but radiant among the pillows, a tiny bundle cradled in each arm. "Come meet your children, husband," she said softly as he approached the bed with reverent steps. He sat carefully beside her, staring in wonder at the two red-faced infants. "They're perfect," he whispered, gently touching a tiny fist that immediately curled around his finger. "Just like their mother." "I thought we might name the boy Thomas after your father," Rosalind suggested, "and perhaps Elizabeth for the girl after my grandmother." "Thomas and Elizabeth Porter," Isaac tested the names, nodding in approval. "Strong names for the future of Silver Creek." As the twins grew, so too did Silver Creek Ranch. Under Isaac and Rosalind's joint stewardship, the enterprise flourished, becoming one of the most prosperous in the county. They added a vineyard to complement the cattle operation, planted an extensive orchard, and built a new barn that was the envy of neighboring ranchers. Thomas and Elizabeth, or Tom and Beth as they came to be called, grew into sturdy, bright children who loved the ranch as fiercely as their parents did. By the time they were 5, they were already insisting on helping with age-appropriate chores, their faces serious with concentration as they collected eggs or fed the barn cats. In the spring of 1884, when the twins were 6, Rosalind gave birth to their third child, another son they named James. The family was now complete, 3 children to inherit the legacy Isaac and Rosalind had built together. It was on the 10th anniversary of their wedding that Isaac surprised Rosalind with a special gift, a small book bound in soft leather. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to find pages filled with his surprisingly elegant handwriting. "The story of Silver Creek," he explained, somewhat self-consciously. "And of us. I started writing it down after the twins were born, thinking someday they might want to know how their parents came together." Tears filled Rosalind's eyes as she read the opening lines. Silver Creek Ranch began with a dream and a piece of land, but it became a home when Rosalind arrived. "Isaac," she whispered, deeply moved by this unexpected glimpse into her husband's heart, "this is beautiful." He took her hand, his calloused thumb brushing over knuckles that bore the marks of years of hard work alongside him. "I wanted to make sure you knew that our children knew that what began as convenience became the greatest blessing of my life." "I do know," she assured him, leaning forward to kiss him softly. "Every day in 1,000 ways you show me." The years continued to pass, marked by seasons of planting and harvest, by birthdays and holidays, by the small daily moments that form the tapestry of a life well lived. The children grew tall and strong, each developing their own connection to Silver Creek. Tom with his father's affinity for the land and livestock, Beth with her mother's head for business, and young James with an unexpected talent for the vineyards. When Tom was 16, fate brought them face to face with the past. Paso Robles had grown into a prosperous town, especially after the completion of the railroad line, and one summer day, a smartly dressed couple stepped off the train, Harold and Vivienne Ainsley, returning for a visit to the mineral springs that had made the town famous. Rosalind, in town with Isaac to purchase supplies, rounded a corner and found herself directly in their path. For a moment, all four adults stood frozen in recognition. Harold had aged poorly, his once handsome face now puffy and lined, his fashionable clothes unable to disguise a paunch. Vivienne remained beautiful but brittle, her eyes sharp with discontent. "Rosalind," Harold said finally, his voice holding a note of genuine surprise. "You look remarkably well." "Thank you, Harold," she replied evenly. "As do you both. Are you visiting Paso Robles long?" "Just a fortnight," he answered, shifting uncomfortably under Isaac's steady gaze. "Vivienne's health, you understand. The springs are recommended." An awkward silence fell until Tom appeared at Rosalind's elbow, tall and strong in his father's image. "Ma, Pa, the wagon's loaded whenever you're ready." Harold's eyes widened as he took in the young man who was clearly Rosalind and Isaac's son. Something like regret flickered across his face. "Your son? Our eldest," Isaac confirmed, placing a proud hand on Tom's shoulder. "We have 3 children. The twins are 16 and our youngest is 10. "I see," Harold said, his voice hollow. "You've been fortunate." "Yes," Rosalind agreed simply. "We have." As they parted ways, Isaac glanced down at his wife. "Are you all right?" She considered the question seriously before answering. "You know, I'm more than all right. Seeing him again, I realized something. I feel nothing. No anger, no resentment. Not even pity, really. Just nothing." Isaac nodded in understanding, taking her hand as they walked toward their wagon where Tom waited. "Because he has no power over your happiness anymore." "Exactly." She squeezed his fingers. "Everything I want, everything I love is right here." That evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the hills with gold, their children's laughter drifting from the yard where they played with the dogs, Rosalind reflected on the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. "I sometimes wonder," she mused, "what would have happened if Harold hadn't left me, if he'd never met Vivienne." Isaac considered this, his arm warm around her shoulders. "I suspect I'd still be a lonely bachelor, and Silver Creek would be half the ranch it is now. And I'd be living a half-life," she added softly, "playing the proper wife to a man who never truly saw me. His greatest mistake," Isaac said with conviction, "and my greatest fortune." Rosalind leaned into her husband's embrace, watching as the first stars appeared in the deepening blue of the evening sky. From the disaster of abandonment had come this abundance, this family, this land, this love that had grown slowly and surely from seeds of mutual respect and shared purpose. "Do you remember what Reverend Lawrence said at our wedding?" she asked. "About partnership being the foundation but marriage becoming much more." Isaac nodded, his cheek resting against her hair. He was right. "Yes," Rosalind agreed, her heart full as she gazed out over the land they had nurtured together, at the children they had raised, at the life they had built from what had once seemed like ruins. He most certainly was. As darkness fell over Silver Creek Ranch, the lights from the house spilled golden across the yard, a beacon of home and hearth, of promises kept and love hard won. Within those walls, a family born of both choice and chance continued to write their story, adding new chapters with each passing season, each shared triumph and challenge, each moment of quiet contentment in a life made rich not by gold or status, but by the lasting bonds they had forged together. And Rosalind Porter, once left with nothing, now possessed everything that truly mattered: a love that had transformed a practical arrangement into a profound partnership, a family that had grown from heartbreak to joy, and a legacy that would endure long after they were gone, carried forward in the land they had tended and the children they had raised to cherish it. For in the end, it wasn't the ranch or the name that Isaac had given her that mattered most. It was the chance to build something lasting together, to create a life where both could flourish, rooted in the fertile soil of mutual respect that had over time blossomed into the deepest kind of love.